Greetings, my guzzlers. We're going to make some bread, and it's actually a new type of bread that I've not made before. Focaccia, an Italian sort of semi-flat but leavened bread. But this particular recipe is going to have potato in it. So, as well as wanting some bread flour, let's get rid of that. We don't want that bit, do we? Bit of peel there. We've got a potato. Now, you want something like in England, Maris Piper. I think in UK they talk about like an Idaho potato, but that's been boiled. Okay, we're going to mash it, but we're actually going to use a potato ricer. I've not used this yet, and we want 230 grams of that potato. Okay, you're going to want some yeast, obviously. You want plenty of olive oil. There's a lot of olive oil in this bread. Some salt, some warm water, and then when it comes to it, we're going to want some like toppings, and you'll want more olive oil. We're going to use oregano. We're going to use bits of onion, some cloves of garlic, and we're going to have some olives going to town. So here we go then, focaccia. And by the way, this is Grandma Gina's. I'm going to take my potato and we're just going to put it in that ricer. Now you can just mash it if you want to, okay. I actually bought this to make gnocchi with, okay, because you don't really want to completely mash it. Now I've got my bowl on the scales because we want to measure out 230 grams, like I said. Was it 230? Yes, 230 grams of this potato, which is going to be just about most of that potato. So I've got 816 grams of strong bread flour, and I've got 2.5 teaspoons of salt. And we're just going to mix that in, and then I'm going to make a sort of semi little well in the middle, and we want to put into that potato. Now some focaccia recipes don't use potato. Okay, by the way, you can do this with a stand mixer with a dough hook on it. It is going to be a very wet dough. It's a very sticky dough, and that's part of what leads to the traditional characteristic bread, if you like. So in goes that. Now I want to just add a little bit of water. Now this is my warm water, and I've got 710 mils of this warm water, and we're just going to add a little bit of that and start to incorporate that into that flour. Obviously at this stage it is still quite a dry flour. And then I've got olive oil, the first lot of olive oil. I've got 3 tablespoons of olive oil going in there. Like I said, this is going to be very much an oily bread. I'm keeping that because for the next lot of oil. What we're making is a normal sort of savoury bread, but there are some versions of focaccia that is made with like sugar, raisins, things like that in it. Okay, let's add some more water, and we're gently incorporating that. Now this is also like a tray bake, Okay, we don't put it in a bread tin. We don't shape it and put it on like a, what's the name, stone, like you might do with sourdough. This is done with a tray, baking tray, but we've got them to one side at the moment. We're quite a long way off of doing that. Okay. Right, I've got two teaspoons of active dried yeast. Okay, just going to put that in there, and I'm gradually going to mix that in with more and more of the water. Okay, now I'm using a wooden spoon. You could, if you want, get your hand in there, or like I say, you could use a dough hook. But let's get the rest of that water in and get that all nicely mixed together. Now, we're not worried about tipping this out and kneading on the surface, but you can, if you choose to, get your hand in there and make sure it's all mixed together. And I might still do that because obviously trying to do it with a spoon isn't necessarily the easiest thing to do. And you can see already what a really wet dough this is. I mean, literally, we'll be pouring this dough later. Now, I did get my hands in there in the end, because it just felt like there was the odd clump of flour in there. Okay, better wash up because it was very sticky. But to be honest, it is so wet, it's a lot easier actually to get off your hands than it is with a normal sort of bread dough. But what we're now going to do is give this an opportunity to rise. So we're now going to cover it over, and we want to put it somewhere warm for at least an hour. And we really do want to see this starting to increase in volume. We want to start seeing it bubble away, and then we'll be ready to move on to the next stage. You still won't need your oven on, but you will be needing your baking tray. Now, this is meant to be for a baking tray that's 18 by 13. Okay, I haven't got one quite that big. Okay, that's a bit small. So what I was thinking of is I might take some of that dough and make a mini one. But that we can worry about in about an hour's time. Now, I said to you about the toppings. We also will prepare our toppings when we've transferred it into the tray, because it's going to need another rise. That's had just about an hour, and it is starting to look bubbly. But before we put it into our trays, because of how sticky that is, we now to generously oil these trays. So you want to make sure you coat all around the sides, all over the bottom, so that when this bakes, it's obviously not going to stick. Now, I said to you, the tray she uses is bigger than this. Any bigger, I wouldn't get it in my oven. Incidentally, I've put my oven on, just simply because the time it will take to preheat it. We are going to be resting this for about 20 minutes, which is really only just about long enough for my oven. So I've already put it on, and It's on at 175. Well, that's what it will be anyway. Right, so that's those trays done. What we now want to do is transfer some of that dough into there. So I'm going to split a chunk off to fit in there, and the rest of it we're going to pour into that. Like I say, this one's a little bit of knocking back, okay, but it's not too bad. But you can see it is quite nice and sort of, well, I was going to say bubbly, you can't really see it's bubbly. Right, let me get that one over here. And this is going to be easier said than done. Oops. Making a right pig's ear out. And then we just want to gently tease this out till it covers the whole of that tray. So I'm just going to add a little bit more on top of there. Be careful obviously where the oil has got, because otherwise it's not going to stick together. Right, that's both trays done. I did suddenly think to myself that I hadn't left enough for that tray, but there's plenty in there. And so now we're just going to cover them both, and we're going to put them somewhere warm for about 20 minutes, and that's going to give us time to start preparing our toppings, as it were. Now then, we're going to want some oil, and we're going to also include with that oil some oregano. I've got about 4 teaspoons of dried oregano. You can use rosemary, you can use fresh rosemary, it's up to you. Okay, and just gonna mix that in there with that. Okay, and we're going to use that as sort of like a topping. We'll still be doing a bit of drizzling with oil, but I also said to you, now Grandma Gina, she used olives, sun-dried tomatoes. I'm not having sun-dried tomatoes. Okay, so I'm going to use some cloves of garlic, or but what we might do is obviously some of those cloves are a little bit bigger, so I might just cut them up, and we're going to put slivers of garlic into it. So I need to prepare that. I also thought I might add small chunks, if you like, of some onion, so I've got those, and we're going to use olives. These have been pitted, okay, but I might halve those. Okay, so whilst the oven gets up temperature, while this has this next resting stage, we're just going to prepare these toppings. Right, so I've uncovered them, and what we're going to start with is this mixture of oregano and oil, and we want to sort of infuse it into the dough. So just dip your fingers in there, and then you want to be pressing all the way through the dough. And this is part of the way, hopefully, the Focaccia, or Focaccia, I can't say the bloody word now. And actually, I didn't tell you, but the word is essentially derived from a Roman word, because this bread was made back in Roman times. Panis Focaccia, or basically flatbread baked on the hearth. The word for hearth or place of baking was focus, F-O-C-U-K, sounds like focus. And in a way that was very much the focus of the kitchen. So because this bread was baked at the focus, it was focaccia. Okay. The word that we use today doesn't appear in texts about the 14th century. But anyway, what we're now going to do is drizzle some of the remainder of this oregano soaked oil over the top of the dough. There are bubbles starting to arise. It's probably not quite as bubbly as old Grandma Gina's, but again I suspect that's probably just a temperature difference. Now, next thing we want to do is, I said to you, we want to put some garlic. So I've cut some bits of garlic up. I'm just going to sort of push pieces of garlic down into the dough. And these, I mean, I was going to say these are sort of in a way optional. Okay, you don't have to use garlic. There are some places in Italy where they do use garlic. Okay, and like I say, there's a sweetened version that has honey and raisins in it. There's, in some parts of the of Italy, Genoa, for instance, it's actually often had at breakfast time, and you would dip it. Still got a little bit of garlic left, but I'm running out of room here. I'm going to add, I've got some red onion here that I've sliced up, so I'm just going to poke a few pieces of that in. Like I say, they would have it at breakfast time, and if so, they would often have it, they'd dunk it, a bit like your digestive. They would dunk it in their morning cappuccino. Remember, cappuccino is a morning coffee. And they would have the focaccia wet and warm. It's probably a bit of a big chunk of that one. Never mind, don't matter. And then finally, I'm going to take these olives and we're just going to press them down into the dough. You might want your olives just to stand up a little bit proud. That's them finished, but what we're going to do now is we're just going to leave them on top uncovered to rest for a little bit, because we've been poking it about for about 10 minutes, and then we're finally going to add a little bit more oil, although I'm not really sure if this really needs any more oil, and some coarse sea salt. Okay, but we're just going to let that rest 10 minutes. Now, there is plenty of oil on the top here. We're comparing it to what Grandma Gina's was like. She didn't have very much of that oregano olive oil mix to drizzle on the top. So I'm not going to put any more oil on it because it is rather swimming in it. But what I'm just going to do now is just give it a light sprinkle of some of these coarse sea salt flakes, and then that's going in that preheated oven for about 40 to 45 minutes until it's nice and golden brown. Okay, and then we'll be bringing it out, and we just leave it in the tin until it's cooled enough to be able to remove it. So it's ended up having an hour, and the small one, which was on the top shelf, even though it said bake it on the lower shelf, I had to put this one on the top shelf. It's taken an hour. Might have slightly overdone it, I think. But now we just want to let that cool, like I say, in the tin. The bigger tray's still in there, getting a little bit longer. And then when that's cooled down a bit, and you've got to watch these baking trays, the aluminium ones, and they retain heat quite a lot. So you've got to be really careful with that one. We'll cut it and see what it's like. And then hopefully, well before then, I'll have that one out. So here's the small one out. Not risen as much as I was expecting. Plus, despite it was swimming in oil, when I put it in there, and every time I checked on it, I could see oil around the edge, and I thought this is going to be really greasy when we bring it out. It seems to have soaked all that up, and in fact, it's been a bit of a bugger to get it out the tin. So they're both out now. The one at the back there's cooling a bit more. I've got this one out, so I think it's time to get my knife and get tasting it.